Welcome, everyone. We're about to start our first live session of the Social Entrepreneurship for Innovation in Health course. Before we start, we're going to wait for 1 minute for the participants to refresh their screen and join us. So if you'd like to grab a cup of coffee, get your notebook, please do so now. This is your opportunity, and we'll start in 1 minute. Thank you. And while we're waiting, I'd like to share that we're very excited to know that we have 405 participants that have joined the course from all over the world. They're coming from the public sector and private sector. And this is our 14th version of the course. So we've been doing it for 14 times, and it's amazing just to see it grow so much. So thank you so much, everybody, for being waiting with me for just a few more seconds before we start. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first live session of the Social Entrepreneurship for Innovation in Health course. This course is brought to you by Ashoka and Boehringer Ingelheim under the Making More Health Partnership. My name is Natalie Zuniga, and it's my honor to be your course facilitator, as well as the facilitator for this live webinar. This webinar will cover Module 1 of the course, titled The Business Case for Social Entrepreneurship. And to cover this topic, it's a great pleasure to introduce you to our guest expert, Joe Agoda. Joe is a public health nonprofit CEO with more than 15 years of experience. Most of his work has taken place on the front line of disease outbreaks in the private, public, and social sectors. Right now, he's the founder of Sostento. He's working on the opioid crisis and the coronavirus pandemic. Prior to that, he advised UNICEF on resource mobilization and intrapreneurship. His passion is in getting helpful technology and capacity building resources into the hands of the implementers. And his projects have contributed to impactful solutions in North America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Additionally, it's my pleasure to let you know that Joe was one of the first, actually the first designer of this course. And so we are very excited to have him join us back. And it's a great honor to have you, Joe, joining us live today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for having me. I want to thank Ashoka for continuing to push this course forward, to continue to improve on it and iterate. And it's amazing to hear over 400 people are here on this course. You're in for a real treat. I also want to thank Boehringer Ingelheim for sponsoring this course. The forward-looking of a company to partner in this meaningful way with Ashoka on making more health and on social entrepreneurship really, I believe, represents what the future of social impact will look like. And I would just want to say that I encourage questions. So please, everyone who's here, who's joining us, this is a live session, so you get to ask me whatever you want. I will definitely share some of my stories and my insights, but it's a great time for you all to ask questions because you're here for a purpose. And hopefully this course and this session will help to start to inform you on how you can realize your purpose even more in the workplace. So I'm just so excited to be here, and thank you, Natalie, for having me.
We're so excited as well. And as Joe was saying, since we're doing this session live, we'd like to remind you that to please scroll down and click yes to the question that you are watching live so that you can receive the extra points. And we don't want you to miss that opportunity, so please do that now. Thank you. And to start, Joe, I would love to start the session in a way that the audience can get to know you and your work a little bit better. So if you can please share with us your professional experience from being a social intrapreneur working within UNICEF, and later on how you became a social entrepreneur by creating Sustento. And I would like for you to share with us also to hear about the inspiration or motivation that has guided you through your journey as well.
Sure, absolutely. So actually, my story begins as a social entrepreneur. So in around 2007, I had started my own nonprofit. The first nonprofit I started, it was called Two-Wheeled Foundation. It was about bringing technology and sustainability to projects in Africa. And so I was a nonprofit. I had started it up, and I had an inspiration with the nonprofit to do something very, very special for the first World Cup that was going to be in Africa. And so I had been working there for a long time in Africa, and I decided I would do something special to start planning. I took a road trip by public transportation from Kampala, Uganda, down to Cape Town, South Africa. And my goal on that trip was to listen to communities and understand how could we celebrate the first World Cup being in Africa and potentially do some social impact work through that celebration. And so I stopped in 6 different countries, and every place I stopped, whether we're a rural community or an urban community, the folks that I were meeting with said the same thing. Can you help us to watch the games? A lot of the places that I was stopping, they were saying like, look, either we don't have constant electricity. Some of them had never even seen soccer games. They knew the names of all the players, but they had never seen a game before. They said the only place maybe to watch is in a bar, which is not child friendly. It's not a family friendly place to watch the game. So again and again, I heard, if you are able to bring us the games to watch, we can do social impact work with that. So by the time I landed in Cape Town, South Africa, at the end of my trip, it was about 3 months later, I had what I thought was the best idea I'd ever come up with for our nonprofit. And that was, we were going to take inflatable movie screens. We were going to get a car generator, a projector, and a satellite dish, and we were going to screen the games live. Then when the whole community came to watch the game, before the game, during halftime, we would do education work, we would do technology training, we would do these things. So I was like, okay, this is like an amazing idea. I flew back to the United States. I lived in Boston at the time with my family. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go pitch this to a bunch of people and I'm gonna get money really quickly. But the year was 2009 now when I started pitching it, and it was the recession. And so what I kept hearing again and again was no. They said, great idea, but we've never heard of your nonprofit before. We don't know exactly who you are. So it's really great what you're doing, but we can't support you. Even the group that had funded my road trip, which had been the International Youth Foundation, said, Joe, we funded the trip, but this kind of event is not the kind of thing that we're going to support. So I must have heard no about 100 times from different funders, from different partners that said, oh, that's so cool. That's such a great idea, but no, we can't help you with that. Then I spoke with a friend who worked at UNICEF, and he's like, you know what? You should come and talk to my team about it. Like, I can't get you in the office, but we're going to have a happy hour on Friday. You should come. This was like early in the week. So I called my friend in New York. I said, can I sleep on your couch? I have this opportunity to talk to UNICEF about my project. When you're a social entrepreneur, you do a lot of that, calling in favors for friends, sleeping on their couches when you're getting your endeavor going. So I got to New York and I went to the happy hour and I met some people from UNICEF, and one person I pitched the idea to said, I really love this idea. Let's meet on it on Monday. Can you stick around till Monday? And I want to hear about it more. So over those drinks, I kind of talked to the person. They were excited about it. I went to my friend. I said, hey, I'm going to have to sleep on your couch through the weekend. I'm going to have to stay. I have to, come on Monday. So Monday came around and I had the business card. I called them. They didn't answer. I emailed them. They didn't answer. And so I said, you know what, this is probably, my only chance. So I went down to the UNICEF headquarters in New York, which is by that big UN building. I went to the front desk. I held up the card and I said, hey, I'd like to meet with this person. I think I have a meeting with them today. And so they called up, and I think the guy was very surprised. He said, oh, okay, yeah, come up, whatever, you're here, like, come up. So I went up to the office, and by that time I had pitched it 100 times. So I was really ready. I had my laptop, I pitched the event, And he's like, oh, it's so cool. This is such a cool idea. Hold on, let me bring in someone. So he brought in another person and he goes, do that, exactly what you said, do that again. So I pitched it again. And I'll never forget, the woman said, we had that funding. We didn't know what to do with it for the World Cup. Let's just use it for this. And then she left. And so I asked, I said, what just happened there? And he said, okay, well, I have a proposition for you. If you are willing to rebrand your whole idea and take it from your nonprofit and make it UNICEF's idea, we will hire you at UNICEF to run this project, and we'll give you a $150,000 budget to do the event. And so I thought about it for like half a second. I was like, yes, of course, I will do it. Because being the social entrepreneur with not many people knowing my nonprofit, it had been so hard. And here was UNICEF saying, hey, we'll give you the full funding if you come brand it as UNICEF's and use it and do it here. And that was the moment I became a social intrapreneur, from an entrepreneur to an intrapreneur, because now I was not running my own organization. I was going to execute this idea from within UNICEF. And we ended up doing it in 4 different countries. We had thousands of people that came to the events. We did education during halftime. People would come hours before the event to sit. A lot of them had never seen a game before. And we had it on a big movie screen. There would be oohs and ahs from the crowd. But we were able to do the education before and during halftime. And we were able to do it in a refugee camp in Zambia, 8 hours from like the main city, where we were on the border with Rwanda and Congo. We had security guards. They gave us the whole soccer stadium there, and we had the game there. And I would have never, ever been able to do that kind of event without UNICEF's backing, because they had the resources, they had the brand visibility, they had the relationships with the government and the community stakeholders. And after the event, I came back to UNICEF and they said, wow, that is amazing. We don't usually do things like that. Can we hire you to do more of these types of projects? And so, of course, I said yes. I wanted to stay around. And that began my beginning of my career as an entrepreneur. And I thought it was going to be so easy. I said, oh, we're going to do World Cup in my village for the Cricket World Cup that's coming up. We're going to do all kinds of events like that. But what I found out was that I had gotten a first lightning in a bottle, it's called. Like everything came together for that first World Cup in my village project. We called it World Cup in my village with UNICEF. But then I spent 3 more years at UNICEF trying to be an entrepreneur, and it was a huge challenge. It was very difficult with the status quo, with the bureaucracy, with a lot of folks not understanding what I was trying to do with entrepreneurship. So that's a little bit of like how I became an entrepreneur, my first project with UNICEF, and how I got going as an entrepreneur.
That's wonderful. I would also like to hear a little bit more about your experience as a social entrepreneur from within UNICEF. How was it to actually be working there? You were saying that it was hard, that it was for 3 years that you were there.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, for example, after we did the World Cup in my village project, we met with a team that was doing something for the Cricket World Cup. And they said, this is really risky. You want to bring all these people together? I think it was being held in Pakistan. And they're like, it's too risky. There's too much risk involved. So what I kind of started hearing again and again, that folks either said, oh, that's too risky. They didn't see the value in doing something new and different and things. So I started kind of bending and breaking rules at UNICEF. And what I found was that while you were able to create a lot of impact through the social entrepreneurship at the organization, and definitely there were people that supported me, there were people who were higher up at the organization who didn't want to take on the risk and would sort of quash that. So it was really challenging, and I felt very lonely and isolated. And that's when I actually thought about, well, what am I doing here? I didn't even know it was entrepreneurship at the time, actually. That's when I became a social entrepreneur, but it wasn't until about a year later that I started looking up how to do innovation within an organization, how to help break the status quo, how to do new things. And I saw that there was this new community of entrepreneurs forming. And I said, wait a second, this is what I'm doing. There are other entrepreneurs out there. And I ended up connecting with someone named Gib Bullock. Gib Bullock is a very famous social entrepreneur. I think we're kind of kindred spirits. I helped develop social entrepreneurship in the field of social entrepreneurship from within a nonprofit, but Gib was doing it within Accenture. He was doing it within a private company, which showed you could do social entrepreneurship in a nonprofit or in multilateral. You could do it inside of corporate. And Gib introduced me to the network. There are people who were trying to do it inside of government all around the world. And we started to share tips about ways that you could actually advance entrepreneurship within an organization. So over those like 3, it ended up being about almost 4 to nearly 5 years at UNICEF, I started to make progress by learning strategies to do social entrepreneurship. I didn't call it social entrepreneurship. That's one of the lessons I would give everyone is when you're doing this inside your organization, you don't go, hey, I'm here to do entrepreneurship. I'm an entrepreneur. You talk about bringing value to the organization. You talk about meeting the goals and how what you're going to do are going to meet the goals. So Gib actually helped get me invited to an entrepreneurship conference in Barcelona, Spain. This was about a year into my UNICEF work. And that was a game changer for me because I went to the conference in Barcelona and I met all these other people that said, yeah, I'm trying to be an entrepreneur and I'm trying to be an entrepreneur for social impact. Therefore, I'm a social entrepreneur. So there's a little difference there that I would tell everyone. Entrepreneurship is really taking entrepreneurial tactics or startup tactics and applying them within the organization. So you can do that to sell widgets, to increase profits, but for social entrepreneurship, you're doing the entrepreneurial startup work inside the organization towards social impact. And so the people that I met at that conference in Barcelona, there were people from Vodafone, from Danone, from other large organizations. And I started to realize that there was a community of entrepreneurs. And I was able to then go back to UNICEF with a kind of a renewed spirit. And I was able to start to track these strategies that you can use to advance entrepreneurship inside the organization. So I was able to do some amazing other projects at UNICEF. We can go into those if we have time, but I was able to actually successfully launch 2 new initiatives inside of UNICEF during my around 4-year tenure there. And so I realized that there was potentially a field here and things that we could continue to share and learn together. So that's a little bit about my time at UNICEF and being an entrepreneur. And like I said, I want questions from everyone. So if you have a question about what that was like, or what it takes to be an entrepreneur inside the organization, please type it in and we'll cover it.
We actually do have a question about how is it possible to catalyze social entrepreneurship spirit, or how to create a mindset within an organization? And this is a question from Mohammed from Tunisia.
Well, Mohammed from Tunisia, I think if you want to create a spirit of social entrepreneurship inside your organization, it really starts with the leadership of the organization. So it'll depend if you are the CEO or the executive director. It will be very different of your approach than if you're an entry level or you're a middle manager. It will look very different. And I'm guessing a lot of you potentially are in that entry level or middle manager level. And so one of the first things, if you're going to do social entrepreneurship, I suggest is to find what's called an innovation godparent inside the organization. This is a term that was coined by Professor David Grayson from Cranfield University. He's one of the leading scholars on social entrepreneurship. And he said that the first thing you need to do is find someone who understands the infrastructure of the organization, who's been there a long time, who understands how things work. Because if you come in and say, hey, I'm here to disrupt and change things and try new things, and you're someone without a track record or you don't have the influence of the organization, it's going to be very hard to create that spirit, Mohammed, that you're asking about. But if you're able to find the innovation godparent, someone who understands, how the organization works and is sympathetic or wants to help you, that person can then help you navigate and see how you can create it within your organization. When you approach that innovation godparent, I know that one of the main things that we're talking about here is the business case for social entrepreneurship. So when you go to that innovation godparent, you need to align it with the business bottom line goals. You can say, hey, I want to do social entrepreneurship because I think it will align with this goal of our organization. Whether you're a nonprofit, you're a corporate, it doesn't matter. You have to say, this is what I want to do, and this is how it's going to benefit our organization. You also might want to tell your innovation godparent, and this is what I'm going to help you achieve with this. Oftentimes, it's good to say, I'm going to help you get the credit. I'm going to help you, raise the spirit and get the accolades for this with me. I'm the junior person, the middle manager. So I think that's really important to get the leadership bought in. And so if you're not the leadership, to find one of those innovation godparents. I also think that for you to understand the spirit and to grow the spirit, you're doing this right now, you need a network outside your organization, who also will support you. Because oftentimes your colleagues will not understand, your colleagues won't be so excited about it. They may say, sometimes like, I'm comfortable here, I don't want to rock the boat, I understand what you're trying to do, but I don't really want to be a part of it. And so you're going to really need a support system outside the organization. So by being part of this course, you're doing a really good step in that, but it's great to have a network of people who are complementary for your skill set or for your expertise. If you want, you're trying to impact an environment, look for other people working in that sector who might want to partner with you. I think that's really important so that you can maintain your spirit. And when things get hard and you hear no, and the corporate or the institution says, oh, we don't want to do this, you need to have someone you can lament to and sometimes vent to. You don't want to do that inside the organization. That'll hurt the spirit. You want to have someone outside the organization. So I would say finding the innovation godparent and also having a network outside your organization who want to support social entrepreneurship are two really good ways to get the spirit going.
That's really great advice, Joe. Thank you. And I would like to go back a little bit into what is the business case for social entrepreneurship? Why does every institution need social entrepreneurship?
Well, I think the top reason that I would say is that there is an existential crisis that a corporation or a nonprofit or a multilateral government, faces if they don't embrace the creation of new value, which is what social entrepreneurship is really about. It's creating new value. And I think it's existential crisis in two specific ways. And this is, for me, central to the business case. One is the existential crisis of staying competitive. That if we continue to do the same way things they used to be, holding on to legacy systems, doing the traditional, the organization will fall behind. Others will sprint ahead. For a large organization, especially, there's always a startup that may be coming into your field. There's always new players. And so you want to make sure that you're staying innovative, right? So social entrepreneurship is a great way to stay innovative, also to bring in top talent, to recruit top talent so you can stay competitive, to engage your top talent in a meaningful way. That's actually what Gib Bullock did inside of Accenture. He had a not-for-loss consulting arm where they would take their expert consultants, reduce the price, and then offer it to governments, nonprofits, and multilaterals. And the talent that went through that said, oh, I want to do a tour of duty with Gib and Accenture Development Partnerships, it was called, would come back into the business happier and more engaged. So there's that bottom line kind of like business case in terms of profitability, productivity, efficiency, and staying ahead of the competitors. On the other side, there's the existential crisis of the social challenges that we face, whether it be climate change, poverty, needing to better education. Everyone has, I think, a social impact area that they are passionate about. And I think you need to look at your company and say, well, which of the social impact areas are most aligned to my company, right? So if you are Starbucks, for example, it's very important that your farmers are empowered. It's very important that the climate doesn't change because you have a supply chain that is really important so you can get the best coffee. And if you don't have social entrepreneurship, you aren't contributing to social impact, then it may hurt your bottom line business, because if we don't solve these really critical social issues and you're not a part of solving those issues, then you may be going out of business for those reasons. And so social entrepreneurship is a meaningful way to be part of problem solving in a sustainable way. Because yes, you could say, oh, I'm donating this money to a social cause, but that's one-off. After you donate that money, that's it. You're not a part of it really anymore. You can feel good, you can do marketing, but social entrepreneurship offers a business value with that social impact. So that's why I think there's like an amazing business case here to both have a social impact, but it also feed into your bottom line business. And so I think those existential crises are what really, at a leadership level, is why social entrepreneurship is so important to any organization. Of course, that looks a little bit different if you're part of a nonprofit or a government. Then it's really about being an effective and efficient and attractive nonprofit to your donors and showing that you're doing, leading the way on that area. But that's a little bit about the business case. And I would just say the last thing is if you're inside a corporate, a private sector business, you have to lead with the business case. You have to say, I want to do this specific thing not necessarily calling it social entrepreneurship. You say, I want to do something that is good for the company and good for society. But first, let me start with how it's good for the company. You have to start there. That's one of my biggest tips when you're getting going. And one of the biggest pitfalls I see is that an entrepreneur goes, well, I have good intentions. I want to help the world. I want to do this. But when they go to their leadership, that starting with that pitch, they don't care. They go, oh, well, then go volunteer after work at something. Like, don't bring it here. I don't understand why you're telling me this. You have to start with that, why it's going to be good for the business.
Totally. Thank you so much for bringing that up, because I think it's sometimes when we're starting and we have like good intentions, we think that that's enough, but actually you have to show how is it going to be good for the business too. And in that sense, I would also like to hear from you, what is for you the difference between social intrapreneurship and social entrepreneurship?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I've done both, and so I can really speak to that. And I like to start with an analogy that being a social entrepreneur or just an entrepreneur is like driving a sports car, and being a social intrapreneur is like driving the bus. When you have your own startup and you own it and you can do whatever you want, you can move very fast, you can cut in and out, and maybe you have one other person in the car with you and you can really speed ahead. But when you're a social intrapreneur, it's driving the bus. You have to bring everyone at your organization along. You have to bring everyone in, and you have to then, get everyone in the right seat and keep everyone happy as you're going to your destination. So again, a social entrepreneur has started up their own organization. They're able to make their own decisions quickly about what they want to do, while a social intrapreneur is done within an existing organization. It has to have an existing infrastructure, an existing brand, an existing mission statement. All of that has to already be set for you to be an intrapreneur within that organization. Now, I know some people might be like, well, then why would I want to drive the bus and not the sports car? Well, there are some major trade-offs that I always talk about that you gain when you're a social intrapreneur inside the organization versus an entrepreneur. So first of all, when you are an intrapreneur, you have existing resources and an existing brand that you are able to utilize. So in my example about UNICEF, what I was able to do was I was able to quickly implement that World Cup in My Village project in 4 countries. Why? UNICEF had offices in each of those countries. They had staff that could reach out to the local governments, to the local partners. They identified who would run it. They made sure we had security guards. They did all these things that my nonprofit would have never been able to do. So you have this existing resources and existing brand. When they said UNICEF is running a screening, everyone in the community would know, okay, UNICEF, we know who they are. This is going to be something for kids. There's going to be purpose to this. The brand is existing. People already knew about it. And of course, the funding. Oftentimes when you're an entrepreneur, there's existing funding. When I, as an entrepreneur, what I'm doing now, I spend 80% of my day fundraising for our work. And so that's a lot of effort that I need to put in. So those are some of the differences. What you do get when you're an entrepreneur is a little more freedom. Right now, I'm running my organization. I want to do this. Hey, we're going to do this. I want to go that way. I want to, I don't need to ask for permission from many people when I'm an entrepreneur. But of course, no one knows my brand. I go, hey, I'm Sustento. I have to educate them every time about who's Sustento. That's my nonprofit now. What do we do? And of course, people would prefer to give and donate and partner with existing brands. So it's a huge challenge there. But the last thing I would want to say, Natalie, to everyone is that the beautiful thing is that entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs make great partners together, and that they can really work together because those two things that they each have are able to support each other. So, I think in the earlier versions of the course, we try to foster this, but if you are a large organization, maybe you work inside of Boehringer and there's lots of rules and regulations and things you want to do, but maybe there is a social entrepreneur here. I know in one of our early versions, there was a group in Kenya that was researching or doing work in a lot of local clinics in the communities in Kenya. They were a social entrepreneurship group running all these things. Then I believe Boehringer Ingelheim wanted to help roll out and do trials of one of their new products. but it was going to take a long time. There's a lot of red tape and things that you do to test something in Europe or the United States. But the group in Africa was ready to do it right away and test it right away. And so I know it was a really beautiful partnership of the social entrepreneurship that didn't have the resources, that didn't have the products and brand reach, but Boehringer Ingelheim was able to bring that and work with this group that could work quickly and agile. And so I've been part of those kind of partnerships a lot, and entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs have a lot to gain together. So I also want to make sure we say that, you could be an entrepreneur, you can be an entrepreneur, and you can work together. But I wanted to just go over kind of some of those differences and trade-offs when you're one or you're the other.
Thank you. I think that's a great example of how social intrapreneurs can work with social entrepreneurs, and they both can just get better results and have bigger social impact. We have a question from Nikki from the Netherlands that is asking about what were the barriers you have encountered to get entrepreneurship acceptance? Mm-hmm. What were the most common challenges that you faced?
Yep. So I think when I started, the biggest challenge that I had was trying to, at the beginning, I would always try to explain entrepreneurship to people. And that was a barrier that no one understood what entrepreneurship was. When I explained it, it's like, oh, it's something to start up new things. It's going to be a little disruptive. It's, going to be these things. I definitely got a lot of pushback when I was just pitching, oh, we should do these entrepreneurial things. I also learned that there's this term called capacity for disequilibrium, which means that your organization, there's different timing for when new ideas can be accepted. So I'd like to talk about if you're a tax firm and you say, oh, I have a new idea to revolutionize how we work, and it's a month before taxes are due and you're really busy and everyone's totally booked, they're going to be like, oh, I don't have time for this, even if it's a really good idea. And so I think but if it's a month after tax season, when everyone's quiet, and maybe we can try something new and do something different. So I think timing is a barrier. Explaining what entrepreneurship is a barrier. And also, an entrepreneur can sometimes also get a reputation for a disruptor. And we know that, I'm sure that everyone here knows that not everyone loves change. If I've been at the organization for 10 years and you're coming in and saying, I want to change this thing, that might be a threat to me, threat to my existence at the organization. What if you make my job obsolete and I'm out of a job? So there are folks that, I think within the organization who are comfortable, that don't want to do risk, and you're going to have to win them over. And so, how I overcame those barriers was really through taking a little bit more of a disciplined approach. And when I had an idea that I thought was really good, I didn't let it out. I didn't say, hey, everybody, this is the idea. Let me tell you all about it. What I would do is I'd start with that innovation godparent. I would find someone who I'm like, who does this idea make sense for within the organization? Or who might be that person that's been here for 10 years? And if I pop out with this, they're going to say, whoa, I'm in charge of that area. We're not doing this. So I would find who's my right innovation godparent? And I let them own the idea. So I said, look, can you help me shepherd this forward? Will you pitch this idea to everyone? So that's one of the things I would do. Second was I'd use that network that I built. So I mentioned I built network outside the organization to build some testing and credibility of the idea. So what I found was that to overcome the barrier of hesitancy and not wanting to try something new, I would go and I would get evidence that the idea would work by working with some of my partners. I would test it outside the office. I would, even get feedback from the people that it would help to say that I really like this, or I would get examples of how it would work. And then with the innovation godparent, with what I call having your users or your beneficiaries be the voice, I would then pitch that to the organization. I would not call it entrepreneurship. I would not say it was my idea. I would let the innovation godparent or someone else in the organization sort of own it. I would help do the pitch, and I would say, well, and look, this is already working. I remember one time I had an idea and I got the social media team who liked the idea to do a post saying, hey, I think it was about a digital mapping project I did inside UNICEF, because I talked to one person higher up. They said, oh, Joe, young people don't want to be digital mappers. They want to be radio hosts and bloggers. So I had the social media team put out a post. Are you interested to be a digital mapper? We are seeking people, 18 to 25. And we had 500 people say, I want to do this all over the world. So when I went to pitch it to the rest of the organization, I had my team there who had already bought in. I said, and here, we put out this post and look at all the response that people wanted to be digital mappers. And so then the higher ups were like, oh, this is great. Young people want to do this. Let's roll it out. Let's do this, because I had done that early work. So I think that discipline is key to overcome the barriers, because I know when you start out as a social entrepreneur, it's really exciting and you want to see progress immediately. And you're like, I'm ready to make impact. Let's just go. And you think like everyone else is going to do this because it's a good thing. It's going to help people. But that's, again, one of, I think, the misconceptions is that people think, well, if you want to help people, go start a community garden, or, they don't see it as part of the business. And there's this big, especially if you're inside a corporate or you're approaching a corporate, there is this like even stigma around it. And this is one of the barriers that we want to talk about, that there's CSR, right? And CSR goes in the corner here. We have our CSR team. So if you go to the mainstream business and you go, oh, I have a social impact idea that's good for the business, they say, go talk to the CSR team. You go to the CSR team, and the CSR team says, wait, you're going to profit off of this idea? It's going to be business value? That's not for CSR. That goes to the mainline business. And so there's this kind of barrier of stigma also that I would say, and this is about the understanding of social entrepreneurship, like I mentioned at the beginning, that, doing good and doing well are totally separate things. And as a business, we don't want to combine them. But I think more and more Boehringer Ingelheim and other businesses are seeing that you can bring them together, but it's still definitely, a barrier as well. So those are just some of the things that I've encountered in my work as a social entrepreneur that I would say are barriers, and just some tips on how you can overcome those barriers.
Yeah, those are wonderful insights about how to overcome the barriers, which a lot of them are resistance to change, right? I also want to say that we have right now about 100 people watching live, which is really exciting. And you mentioned something about corporate social responsibility and the difference between corporate social responsibility and social entrepreneurship. We actually have a question about that from Isabel. What is the main difference?
Well, sometimes it's just semantics, but basically how I see traditional corporate social responsibility is that they're saying we set aside a percentage of the money that we make, 1%, 2%, into our corporate foundation or our CSR group. And then that group on its own, without corporate influence, is going to decide what charities they're going to donate to, what causes they're going to support. And those are really charitable donations, strictly charitable donations that they give away, right? Where it's like, I'm going to give this money to the school, and then it's for the school to run for a year, and that's it, right? Or I'm going to buy supplies for the school. And that may or may not be tied to the business. There's not going to really be any tie-in between the business and that, other than maybe some marketing, like, oh, look, we're a good company, we care about our community, but there's no business value there, other than maybe a little bit of cause marketing. And what I would say, and why I believe there's a place for corporate CSR, but I don't think it's sustainable, because I've heard from a lot of those groups that receive the corporate donation, it's a one-off. Oh, here's the money for your school for a year. Well, corporate, are you going to donate every year for the next 10 years to help us continue to run our school? Like, what is the longevity of your donation? So that's, and I also believe that sometimes misses the resources and the expertise and the know-how inside the corporation that could be being applied to these groups. And that's where I come back to Gib Bullock, where he was like, well, let me use the talent inside the organization to offer something that does bring in proceeds to Accenture, does help these nonprofits and large governments and institutions solve social problems, and let's engage talent and help retention strategies. And so that's like that's starting to look at the difference of social entrepreneurship, kind of breaks down the barriers between the corporate foundation of the CSR and the mainline business. One of my favorite examples of like that is M-Pesa at Vodafone, where there were all these unbanked individuals. It started in Kenya, I believe, and Vodafone and Safaricom, the Kenyan-based corporate, said, okay, there's an opportunity here to help the unbanked and create a new product. And so they launched M-Pesa, which was one of the first ever digital money products. It's all Everyone has them now, but at the time it was really groundbreaking that your phone could be your bank. And and so Vodafone and M-Pesa saw this as a business opportunity. And of course, they were going to help all these unbanked individuals, but they made a lot of money off of the transactions that were happening. And they were a very minute amount from each transaction, but it was a very successful product that they were then able to roll it out across Africa and then even bring to Europe where they were doing it. And again, that's where the stigma comes in a little bit of a CSR group saying, well, M-Pesa, you're making money for the company. How's that social impact? It's a product, you're making money. But M-Pesa was able to grow rapidly. It got a lot of investment from the company, and it created a lot of jobs and created a lot of unbanked individuals to get access to money faster. And so to me, that's the difference of social entrepreneurship with M-Pesa. Was it was good for the company, it was good for society, and it was really good for the employees that loved developing the product, seeing the social impact it had, but that it also delivered results for the business. So I think that's, for me, the big difference is that CSR is usually placed in an isolated, kind of set aside kind of thing, and they do charitable work. And again, I'm not saying I don't think CSR is important. I do think there's a role for it, but social entrepreneurship is more tied to your mainline business, that it has to help drive profits, or you have to make the case of how it will drive profits, or if you're a nonprofit, how it will drive your mission. It has to have that to be considered social entrepreneurship.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joan, for explaining the difference very clearly. And we have 3 participants that are asking a very similar question, and it's related of making mistakes, and how is failure and making mistakes part of the process for an entrepreneur? Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I would start by just starting with the other side of it, which is something that entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs don't do enough, which is the importance of celebrating success and celebrating milestones, because there will be failures. And one of the things I found with social entrepreneurs, myself included from time to time, is that you're working so hard to achieve the next step that you forget when you accomplish something. For everyone else that's involved, you need to celebrate that success. And so first, I would just say there are going to be failures, but there also is going to be success. And when you have success, don't forget to really celebrate it, show gratitude, and make a big deal when you succeed on something. Now, with failure, it's going to come. And I think, one of the most important things with failure is there's a mantra sometimes that I find with entrepreneurship that works better, which is fail fast, fail forward. And I think that that's something that in entrepreneurship is something that doesn't work as well. And that you can celebrate failure, even that there's fail fests. I remember there's been, and I find that while for entrepreneurship, when you're in charge, you can keep people going and say, well, failure is part of it. With entrepreneurship, failure should be learned from. That you should expect failure from the beginning, that you should set expectations that we're doing something new. There are going to be failures, but here's how we're tracking the data. Here's how we're looking at things, so that when we do fail, we're going to analyze the data, we're going to look at what worked and what didn't, and we're going to iterate and continue on, that we're going to learn. And this is not only saying we're going to learn from our failures, but from the very beginning, making sure you're putting in kind of components that you're capturing data. And you're capturing what's working, what's not. So in the beginning, you can set up that they're going to be failures. And when it does happen, you can say, all right, we knew this was going to happen. Let's have a retrospective. Let's look at the data. Let's look at what it's telling us. Let's look at how we pivot and kind of move around this failure. So that's one of the most important, I would say, components of making sure you can deal with failures. And then also why that external network is really important. So when there is a failure, sometimes you don't want to vent to your team. You want to have someone you can go out and have dinner with, or have a drink with, or have coffee with, that is outside your organization. And you could say, oh my gosh, there's so-and-so who's just holding on to the legacy systems and decided, I've had so many times where they one person says they're going to fund it, and then a higher up goes, oh, we can't put money for that. And you want to go in, yell at that person, say, well, why aren't you doing this? Like, why are you holding on to the past? Why are you, causing us this failure? But you don't want to do that. You need to maintain your reputation inside the organization. So that's why the external network is really important. When you have failures to vent with, to talk about the failure with, to come up with ideas and troubleshoot with. So I think that external network is also really important for working through failures.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you for all those inputs. I think they're going to be really helpful for our audience. And I would like to hear a little bit more about examples of social intrapreneurship within the health and wellness industry. I know it's important for any industry and for any sector of society, but do you have some examples for in the health industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So at one of the nonprofits I worked on, we did a project with diagnostics. So it was a disease diagnostics device. And what had happened was there was the corporation that said, we're developing a new version of our diagnostic that this is around, I think 2011, 2012, we were doing this project, that is going to be digitally connected, in that instead of going and taking a test on someone and then sending it to a lab and then waiting for the results in this, they said, we have a new Internet of Things device that you can test on site. It turns the molecules into bits, they said, which is the magic part, which I don't understand, sends it to the lab analyzes it and sends it back to the device in real time. So you get that result much quicker. And the diagnostic company came to our nonprofit because they said, we want to test this and make a very robust product. And the company was the Silicon Valley company. And they said, nonprofit, can you help us? We would like to work with governments in 3 specific countries. It was South Africa, Vietnam. I think those were the 2 main ones, actually. So we want to roll out the device in South Africa and Vietnam. We want to work with the government, and we want to work with the Gates Foundation because they want to fund this. But as a corporation, we can't do this. So they came to us, the nonprofit, and they said, will you be the kind of partner with us in this to help us with this project? And so it ended up being a really amazing social entrepreneurial project for the corporation, because we ended up, as a nonprofit with the Gates Foundation, making deals with the ministries of health in Vietnam, in South Africa, because the case to them was, we have these next generation devices that will overcome one of your biggest challenges here in these countries, which was people would walk days for a test or something, it would be hard to get them the results, and that it would be very difficult to get them that information. So of course they were going to donate the devices, and they were going to do this really in-depth research and test and learn. And so we ended up rolling it out in those 2 countries. And the diagnostic company got this amazing research and development opportunity, because these were like remote hospitals. They were like urban, not your like typical United States or European environment. So they actually ended up creating a really robust product and seeing how it could work in these environments, and that, the government, the ministries of health and the hospitals really learned about these new types of devices. And what happened was, then the company was able to take all that research and learning, put it in before they rolled it out in Europe and North America, that same device. And they ended up creating a very nice device that was a huge seller for the company. But they would have never been able to rapidly test it, because in Europe and the United States, there's much more regulation and rules to do that kind of project. So that was one in health and wellness. That was a really successful project that I was a part of, that did good for these countries and for their kind of local health departments and hospitals, but also did well for the company that ended up creating a really amazing product. GE has stories like that. There's a heart monitor. You can look that story up. It's a really good case study. GE had I think a heart EKG machine that in the United States cost thousands and thousands of dollars. But in India, they needed something portable and lightweight. And the India GE team created a very low cost version that did the same thing. And then the GE in the United States said, wait a second, why are we selling this huge expensive one? And now that machine, I think, are in a lot of ambulances in the United States. So those are, that's how I see a lot of the opportunities in social entrepreneurship for corporations in health and wellness, are to do these kinds of partnerships in, lower resource settings with new and innovative projects that then help their bottom line business back in the kind of, in the United States, Europe, or countries with a little bit more resources.
That's wonderful. And they have like a really great social impact on like really broad audiences, which is like really important. So Joe, we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to just go for two more questions. And I would like to know from your perspective, what is the future for social entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so one of the points I want to make about the future of social entrepreneurship, and just I think this is a really important point for everyone, is that for the future of social entrepreneurship, we can't make it about the entrepreneur. So the entrepreneur is like the brave individual who's willing to break the rules, push things forward, and it's a very rare person that wants to do this. So I've done it, and it's not easy, and it's very hard, and it's very difficult. There's probably maybe, I think, 2% of the people listening who are like, okay, I want to be the social entrepreneur, I want to do this. But 98%, everyone else gets to be involved in social entrepreneurship. Everybody can contribute to social entrepreneurship. So the future, to me, is what Boehringer Ingelheim is doing with this course, and is they're creating a culture of entrepreneurship. They're creating a place where everyone can contribute. And actually, the individuals who are the entrepreneur may be able to stay under the radar. Sometimes an entrepreneur doesn't want to be seen. They don't want the limelight because that actually hurts their ability to do entrepreneurship. So I think that the future of social entrepreneurship is really about building that culture inside the organization, finding ways that everyone can contribute. There are little things you can do. Once you understand what social entrepreneurship is, you can say, wait, that person might be the entrepreneur. Let me be their ally. Let me see how I can help them. And maybe at some point, you will get to be the social entrepreneur, and you will decide, okay, I want to do this. But not everyone can be the social entrepreneur. Not everyone needs to be the social entrepreneur. So that like culture is just so important to foster inside the organization. So I think that's part of the future. I think there's just huge opportunities, environment and in health, to look at ways that social entrepreneurship can make a difference. There's so many problems that have been left unsolved that we can apply social entrepreneurship to do. I also think in the future, we can look at hybrid models for social entrepreneurship. So at the organization I run now, it's Sustento. One of the ideas that we've been thinking about is that we've started to create tools and services at our nonprofit that have business value, right? But it's not our mission to sell our products. Everything we create is free to frontline public health workers at Sustento. However, our team and our board have been talking about, well, what if we had a for-profit subsidiary that the nonprofit owns? And we let that for-profit subsidiary be our social entrepreneurship business wing of the nonprofit, where they can go take what we're learning from the nonprofit and go to the business world and see if there's something that we've created or the knowledge that we can then sell. The idea is that the profits that go into the subsidiary, it would be kind of run as a company, but the profits go to the nonprofit and allow us to solve problems, allow us to be entrepreneurial ourselves. So I think hybrid models that are not, strictly nonprofit or strictly corporate is part of what I think also is the future. And lastly, I would add that I think in the future of social entrepreneurship, there'll be investment funds inside the organization. There'll be more dedicated, once the culture is there, there'll be dedicated resources like this course that I know BI is doing. And I believe they do more things like that. So I think BI is just demonstrating what the future looks like, because a lot of companies are not like this. Having investment funds, having training, saying we're looking for social entrepreneurial characteristics. And when we're hiring, so being part of hiring practices, saying people who have an entrepreneurial spirit or want to, have social impact as part of their work, I think as part of the, recruitment and hiring and training is also the future to create that culture of social entrepreneurship.
That's wonderful. And related to that you were just mentioning about what would be the traits or the skills of a social entrepreneur?
So if you're going to be a social entrepreneur, I think resilience is number one. You have to be a very resilient person. You have to be able to take no a lot. If you're someone who's like, I don't like, hearing no, I don't like trying to persuade and convince people and doing all that, it's not for you. So you need to feel like you're really resilient and you're driven to realize the social impact you believe is possible and the business value that you can create. But you have to be resilient, because it'll be a lot of education, a lot of breaking down barriers and stigma to get there. I think with the resilience, you need empathy as well. I know that's something Ashoka talks about a lot. And the empathy is to understand why people inside the organization are against your idea. There's a lot of things of why don't you like this idea? It's such a good idea. It's going to help so many people. But I think when I've had empathy and I've realized, well, this middle manager that I'm trying to convince has 2 kids who are about to go to college. They can't lose their job. They're not here to take risks. They really need to have a security in their job, and they're not looking to do something different. And I think having that empathy for your coworkers, that they're not just like cogs in the wheel, they're people, and they have real emotions, and they have real things at stake in their life. And so being able to have empathy to understand them and their situation will allow you to buy them into your ideas and be patient when the time comes. And the third one is discipline. You have to be so disciplined as a social entrepreneur to know that, like, well, here's what I'm trying to achieve. And this is my purpose, but I need to communicate that differently to everyone else at the organization. And that discipline can mean not to bring out your idea until you've really vetted it and you've got data and you've got the allies, because it's so exciting when you have a good idea. Like, this is amazing. But in social entrepreneurship, a good idea is not enough. You really need to build your network inside the organization, outside the organization. You have to test it. You have to understand the idea fully. You have to have really a robust plan. And that discipline is hard, especially when you're excited and you know, like, the problem, how deep the problem is. And to me, how I stay disciplined is that you can always go out into the field or call up someone who's experiencing the problem and talk to them, and not your coworkers about it. And that's the person you can, like, really open up to about what your idea is, what you're excited about. But I think there's a lot of discipline you need to have of when you present your idea, who you present your idea to, how you present your idea. So my 3 are resilience, empathy, and then that discipline is our 3 characteristics I would point to.
Totally agree. Resilience, empathy, and discipline are definitely needed for a social entrepreneur to be able to do his work. We're going to talk a little bit more about, like, the different strategies and skills that need to be developed in the future modules, but it was so great to hear your input about it. So we only have less than 5 minutes left. So maybe we can just go with the last question, which would be basically really like an advice. Do you have any advice for, like, aspiring social entrepreneurs, novice social entrepreneurs who are watching us right now?
Yeah, my number one, like, pitch or saying, why would you want to be involved in this, is that there's so much purpose when you are involved with social entrepreneurship. And I think that's what drives a lot of people to social entrepreneurship, is they are looking for purpose in their work. And I know sometimes not all of us can have that on an everyday basis, especially inside of corporate. There are bottom line things you have to do. But if you're involved in social entrepreneurship, either being the entrepreneur or supporting entrepreneurship, it will bring purpose to your everyday work. And I think that purpose is what keeps you going through the harder times. I would add that you need to make things fun. Also, when you're doing social entrepreneurship, there's sometimes a seriousness of, like, well, this is the problem and it's so serious and it's so hard, or it's so important that we do this. But bringing fun into the equation is just really, really important. What from that World Cup project I mentioned in the beginning, was that putting up those screens and making that a fun activity was fun for the community, but also was a fun thing for UNICEF to talk about. I remember at UNICEF, one of our main tactics that we did when we needed a higher up to buy into our idea was that we had what we called the innovation room, which we actually put up Post-it notes. We had half-built technology, and we would, like, strategically place it around. And when we brought in the senior person, that's where we had the meeting, because they were like, oh, this is, like, fun. Look at all these things you built. And there's, like, Post-it notes, and it's exciting, and there's energy. So, like, we, made it an enjoyable, fun experience, because we found that if you did it in the same room where you had your boring quarterly meetings, they were more likely to be like, no, I'm not really excited about this. When you held the meeting in this space that, funny enough, had nothing to do with the project often, but felt like a innovative, fun space, they were like, oh, what are we doing here? This is, like, cool. Like, tell me about it. And then lastly, like, I would say with Sustento. So Sustento, the organization that I founded, and now I'm looking to support entrepreneurs inside my organization. Sustento is a word, it's an Italian word that means to nourish, uplift, and sustain. And that's our mission to do with the frontline public health workers. But I think that that kind of nourishing, sustaining, uplifting, it needs to be central to whatever you're doing, because that will carry people through the hard times and bring in more people from your organization. So if you're able to drive purpose, if you're able to make it fun, if you're able to make it uplifting, you're going to get a lot more people at your organization that want to be involved with whatever you're doing. So you need to really keep that idea that you have close to your heart, but probably away from your mouth sometimes, and not talk about it until the results speak for itself. But make sure you have fun with this. It is quite enjoyable when you see the results, when you're able to break through and do something new. It is really a rewarding experience. So that would be my last pitch here at the last minute, is that yes, there will be hard times with this, but it's so meaningful, and it's and you are now taking your first step. And so, of course, I want to continue to engage with you. LinkedIn is a great way. You can link in with me, Joe Agoda. Also, I'm very active on Twitter these days. That's the place where a lot of the media and the donors engage. So I'm on Twitter at Joe Agoda. So you can find me there talking about the work we're doing at Sustento on the pandemic and on the opioid overdose crisis as well. So please engage with me. I wish you all lots of luck on your journey. You're in good hands with Natalie and the Ashoka team as you make your way through this course. And you'll get out of it what you put in. So engage, and it's a great networking opportunity. So I encourage you all to get on those message boards, chat, make connections, and attend these live sessions, which I know are kind of the fun part of the course.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. This was really great. I love your parting advice. I feel like it's so important to make things fun, to also celebrate the success, right? And it's been a real great pleasure to have you. We didn't have too much time to talk about Sustento, but our participants can just check it out on the website online. And before we finish, I would like to remind all the participants that are watching live to please scroll down and click yes to the question that you're watching live, so you can receive your extra points. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And I wish you all the best for your continued success and your path of change making. We hope you enjoy the session, and we'll see you next week on October 15 with Lizzie Kiama at 7 a.m. EST for our second live webinar discussing entrepreneurial challenges and opportunities. Well, thank you so much, Joe. Thank you so much.